Welcome, everyone. My name is Monica Velarde, and I'm an analyst for the City of San Jose's Housing Department Rent Stabilization Program. And I will be giving a live rent registry demo on how to register for the 2020 registration period. For today's webinar, everyone will be put on mute. As we go through the slides, you may submit questions through the question and answer box. Marissa from the Rent Stabilization team will help organize the questions to be answered at the end. If you are joining us by phone, please send any questions you may have to rentregistry@sanjoseca.gov, and we will respond to your questions after the webinar. As a background to this webinar, I wanted to begin with the purpose of the Rent Registry. The Rent Registry allows the city's rent stabilization program to collect data on rent stabilized apartments, monitor changes in tenancy and rents, and track allowable rent increases. The information will enhance the ability of city staff to monitor compliance with the apartment rent ordinance. Property owners will need to update the information in the rent registry during the time period selected by the city on an annual basis. Property owners will have 60 days to register their apartments. This registration period began on October 1st, and the deadline to register your apartments is November 30th of 2020. To successfully register, property owners will need to log into their existing accounts and provide updates on tenancies, including rent increases, vacancies, new move-ins, or no changes. To log into your account, go to sjrentregistry.force.com and enter your username and password. If you no longer remember your password, you can reset it by clicking on Forgot Your Password at the login screen. For step-by-step instructions on how to reset your password, refer to our user guide or watch the video tutorials located on the Customer Support tab at the Rent Registry homepage. If you do not already have an account, you'll need to create one first using your city-issued credentials and PIN. Credentials are available upon request, so if you don't have them, don't worry, just email or call us and we can help get those to you. And then once an account is created, you'll be able to input the required information to complete the registration for your property. Due to COVID-19, City Hall is closed, and so unfortunately we are not able to provide in-person assistance with this year's registration, but we have a list of resources available to assist with the registration process. So if you go to the Rent Registry homepage, under the Customer Support tab, you'll find a user guide in 3 languages, short video tutorials in 3 languages, a Contact Us feature where you can send an email to the Rent Registry staff. Our phone number is also located on that same page if you wish to prefer, or if you prefer to give us a call. We understand that not everyone is best with computers, so we do offer a paper registration form located on our Rent Registry website, or you can also call or email us to request the form. In a minute, I'll be logging into the Rent Registry website to show you how to register your units for this registration period. As I go through the examples, I'm under the assumption that everyone's completed their first registration period. If you've never registered before, it's going to look a little different. You're going to have a lot more questions to answer because we'll need that initial tenant data. But assuming that you've already registered before and this is your second time registering, that will be how my examples will kind of be based off of. So my first example will show you how to enter a rent increase. The second one will be how to enter a new tenant when the previous tenant has moved out. Then I'll show you how to register a vacant or owner-occupied unit. And then lastly, I'll go over the 2 new features added to the website this year, which is a no change button, which is useful when all the information for a unit has not changed. And then an edit last entry button where you can make corrections to your very last entry. So give me a second as I log or as I go to the Rent Registry webpage. Okay. So now that we're at the web page, what you'll want to do first is go to owner login. Again, this is assuming you've already created your account. Okay, so once you've logged in, you'll see these kind of funny numbers over here on the top right. You'll want to click on Go to Registry, Owner Portal. And then if you only have one property, then that property would actually show up now. But since in this example, we have multiple properties under this ownership, so you'll actually want to click on the drop down and select the property address that you're going to register. So in this case, I'm going to select 122 Test 2 Avenue. And then I'm going to click on Direct Entry. Okay. So like I said, I'm showing this example as under the assumption that I've registered previously, and maybe I've even made some updates as things have changed throughout the year. And so going to our first example, I will just show you something very simple, which is a rent increase. So unit number 1, this tenant, and I can kind of see, some of that summary on this top line here for unit number 1. But I know looking at this, $2,000 is not what this tenant pays anymore. This tenant did get an increase. So I need to add that to this. So I'm going to click on Make a Change, click on Rent Increase, and then I will put in the new monthly rent and the effective date. And then you can review the information. If anything else has changed, you can see these are available to change, but everything else is the same. This person did only have a rent increase. So I will scroll down and then hit save. You'll see a rent history pop up, and it will also show me the percentage of increase that was applied to this apartment. I'm done with unit number 1. So now I will go back to the main page and I will go to unit number 2, where I'll show you guys how to register a new tenant. So this person who lived here, who had moved in January 1st of 2000, has moved out. So I need to update this by doing a new tenant. And then it's going to ask you for the reason the last tenant moved out. In this case, this person moved out voluntary. Their move out date was 9/1/2020. And then now about the new tenant. So my new tenant moved in shortly after and is paying $2,100. The effective date, in this case, since they just moved in, there hasn't been an opportunity for any rent increases. So the effective date is the same as the move-in date. Oops. There. You got to enter at least one tenant name. And if they paid a security deposit, the amount, whether they receive rental assistance or not, such as Section 8 or another type of government subsidy, and then whether they have laundry, pool, or a storage. In this case, as you can see, this is pre-populated from my previous tenant information, and since that information hasn't changed, I can actually leave it alone. They still have access to laundry, they still have one parking space, and it is still a 1-bedroom unit. Okay, that registration for unit number 2 is complete. I will go back to the main page, and then I will do unit number 3. For this example, I said I could do a vacant or owner occupied. I'm going to do an owner occupied unit. So this unit used to be occupied by a tenant, but they did move out, and so now the owner has moved in. So vacancy reason for last tenant, I'm going to say it was a voluntary move out, and that tenant moved out, I'll just say this date, and the owner's move-in date was shortly after, and then you save, and it is now an owner-occupied unit. Okay, almost there. We're going to go to unit number 4. Unit number 4 is an example of the no change button, which I had mentioned earlier in this webinar. So like I said, although you're required to register during the time period that the city designates on an annual basis, if you would like to continue to update information as things change, you can do that too. And so a lot of time when we come to a registration period, people have been keeping up on the data, so there actually isn't really anything to change in the registration period. So for that purpose, we implemented a no change button. So for unit number 4, nothing's changed. In this case, the person's still paying $2,100, move-in date, date of last increase, everything's the same. But in order to satisfy the registration, I need to do something. So in this case, I'm going to register it as a no change. And you can review the information if you want. Everything's still the same. I'm going to hit submit. Okay, unit number 4 is now registered. My last example is using the other new feature, which is the edit last entry. So this gives you a chance to make a correction to your information for your last entry. So if you had an error in 2 registrations ago, if you wanted to fix that initial entry, you would contact one of our city staff members and we could fix that for you. But if it was your last entry, then you can actually make that change on your own. So in this case, I was about to register number 5 with a rent increase, but I see pretty quickly that I entered the rent amount as $210 a month, which isn't right. So before I even register for this year, I want to correct that. So I'm going to click on make a change. I'm going to click on this button here, edit last entry, and it's going to allow me to look at that last registration. And here is where I put the 210. I'm going to change that to 2100 is what I meant to do. I'm going to update. Okay, it's updated, but it's not registered yet, right? We're only making a correction. If we wanted to actually register it again, we would need to select one of these green buttons. And in this case, everything else remains the same. I'm going to do a no change again and hit submit. Okay, then here, like so you could see the summary, you could see a last updated date, if you have any questions about when you last touched one of these units. Okay, I'll go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, and so this concludes the live rent registry demo. As a reminder, we have 2 upcoming rent registry webinars this week, one in Spanish and one in Vietnamese. An email was sent out this morning with a link to sign up. If you did not get this email, we can definitely forward the information to you. You can call us or you can send us an email. Our information will be in the next slide for doing so. All right, everyone. Well, we can now take questions, Marissa. As a reminder, you can submit any questions below in the Q&A box. Or for any other questions or maybe something a little bit more complicated, you can email us at rentregistry@sanjoseca.gov, or you can call us at 408-975-4480. And also, this webinar will be posted to the Rent Registry webpage as well as our city webpage. Marissa, do we have any questions?
Hi, Monica. Yes, let me begin with the first question. There is not a button for a rent decrease. During this time, we are having lots of tenants asking for a decrease that we have complied with. So in this case, what would this landlord do?
It's a good question. And that one can be a little bit more complicated because I guess my first question would be for the rent decrease, is it temporary? Because the rent increase moratorium, which ends this December, ends December 31st, allows the landlord to temporarily reduce the rent, but that rent does have to go back to market, or sorry, to base rent amount in January or by the end of December. So for January, whatever that tenant is starting to pay in January, that is considered their base rent. So if it's a temporary decrease, I would just say it's not affecting the true base rent, right? What their lease actually says. So you could just disregard that and just leave the rent at, you would want to enter what the base rent is. Now, if this decrease is their new rent, and when you give them their next rent increase, you're going to do the up to 5% off of that, then you could actually do the edit last entry if that rent amount is the last entry that you did. So let's say that tenant was paying $2,000, but because of the situation right now, you've reduced the rent to $1,800, and it's not temporary. It's $1,800 until the next anniversary date of the rent increase. You could go to edit last entry and just change that 2,000 to 1,800. Now, if it's a little bit more complicated, I just say reach out to one of the staff members. We can look at it and kind of see, like I said, because the edit last entry is just for your last entry. And so sometimes you're not able to just reduce or change the rent amount. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Mona. Okay, another question. I registered all my units last week, but before the end of my registration period, there will be changes. How many times do we need to make these changes during the open period?
That's a good question. So the requirement is to do it at least once. So any changes after you register during the 60-day period of October to November, if you've done it once already, you're considered registered. Anything after that are considered, we look at as an update. So it's up to you. You can continue to keep the information updated, or you can hold off until next year when the city has designated another registration period, and then add those updates then, which could qualify as your registration for that period. So it's up to you.
Great, thanks. Okay, next question. Do we need to press the no change button if there is no change, or can we just leave it the way it is?
You will want, if the no change button is available, that tells me that you have not registered yet for this registration period. So the no change button is just kind of a one-time use there, like I said, because you are required to touch the system during the registration period. If there's nothing to change, we needed to give people an option. So the no changes there is to satisfy your registration within those 60 days. So if you've registered during the 60-day, that no change button is going to disappear. You won't even have the option anymore.
Thanks. And we have one more. It's not entirely related to the rent registry, but it is a good question. If my anniversary date for a rent increase is October, but I cannot increase the rent due to the moratorium on rent increases, will I lose my anniversary date?
Yes. Yes, because we are now in November, and so we've already passed that. So something that could have been done, I guess, would have been you could have issued you could have had the lease renewal for October, have the base rent sent to the new rate, but then under the rent increase moratorium, you offer the opportunity of having a reduced rent until the start of the new year, which then you would bring it back to the base rent, which you had given them in October. But since we're in November now, yeah, unfortunately, you've lost that anniversary date. The only way to keep it now would be to actually not do a rent increase until October of 2021.
Thanks, Monica. Okay, that's all the questions we have for now.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you, everyone. I know that there's some unique cases out there that maybe what I went over didn't cover, and that's really your opportunity to email us, call us, and then we can really, dig deeper, actually pull up your account, look at your information, and help you through the registration. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Wait, sorry, we got a few more questions that just came in. Sorry.
That's okay.
First one, what happens if I forget to update the account? Do we get a reminder? Is the update always will be from October to November for every year going forward?
Very good question. So, COVID kind of changed things up for us. So ideally, we'd want the registration to be earlier in the year. So I can't promise that next year's registration will fall during the same month. What I can say, though, is that we are looking to implementing a period of year that's going to be the same every year moving forward. Just things were a little weird this year. So I can't say for sure that will be when the next registration period is for next year. Was there another part to that question? Sorry, Marissa, I feel like I missed something.
It just said, what happens if they forget to update the account? Do we need a reminder? And then
got it. So there isn't a reminder. I mean, the reminders are emails that hopefully you're getting if we have your email address, meaning if you've created an account in the rent registry, it does ask you to put in an email address. If we have that, we will send you updates through email as far as when our next registration period is. If you are signed up to receive our apartment rent ordinance mailings, email, I guess we call them e-blasts, then you should also have received a reminder on that. And then also we do send a letter to the owner's mailing address on file. So hopefully those, will help you remember or be informed as far as when the next period is.
Thanks. And we have another one.
Mhm.
Is there any consequences if we don't register?
Yes, there is. So the first one would be that you cannot increase rent. So our registration period does end so November 30th of this year. If the rent increase moratorium was not in effect, we would say that you couldn't implement any rent increases in December without having been registered. But due to the rent increase moratorium, you can't increase your rents anyway until January 1 of 2021. So come January 1, 2021, if you are not registered, you cannot give any rent increases. And then additionally, we do have a citation process in place where if you are not registered, we could cite you for the amount. I believe it's $500 per unit. So definitely very important to register. And like I said, we're here to help. If you need any help registering, we can help you with that.
Thanks, Monica. Can you go over again the requirement for the rent registry? Is this a requirement for all landlords?
Oh yeah. So if you are a land or an owner of a rent stabilized apartment, meaning it's under rent control in the city of San Jose, falls under the apartment rent ordinance, then you are required to register in the rent registry. If you do not know whether your building is under rent control, just give us a call or email. We can do a quick check for you. But if you received our letter, there's a very good chance that you are required. And but anyway, like I said, you can always check with us. If you're just not sure, just give us a call or email.
Thanks. And then another one, if my rent is not going to be increased until next January, should I enter the rent increased amount or register the current amount?
Another good question. Actually, these are all good questions. So that's up to you. The only thing I would say is if you add that rent increase into the system now, if that tenant were to move out for whatever reason, I guess you'd have to go in and I don't know, I guess do edit last entry. So it's up to you. You could do no change right now. And then when that tenant, there really is a change in tenancy, you could update the system then, or you can do it now, assuming that, the tenant's going to remain, and which will most likely happen, right?
Thanks. Next question, going back to the rent increases. What if I noticed my tenant of the rent increase, but could not actually raise rent until January and told them so? Will I be able to increase it on my annual anniversary date for an increase?
Okay, so you gave the tenant the notice of increase, but the increase did not take effect. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the tenant of the rent increase, but could not actually raise rent until January and told them so. Will I be able to increase?
Oh, got it.
And yes, they said yes.
Got it. Okay. So, regardless of when you give that notice or when that increase takes effect, you can't have another increase take effect until a minimum 12 months have passed. So that's all I can say. If you've increased it today, then you can't do it again for another 12 months.
Okay, and that looks like that's it for now. Oh, sorry, I just saw one more.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm glad we're getting questions.
Yeah, and this one again isn't completely related to the rent registry, but how would this information impact my tax filing?
Meaning the information in that they're putting in the rent registry? I'm guessing that's what they mean.
Yes, I'm
okay.
As well.
How does it affect your tax filing? We don't report this data to, the data is purely, we're using it in our housing department to make analysis and decisions, moving forward. As far as I know, it stays within the housing department. So I don't think it would have any effect to any taxes.
Thanks, Monica. Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Okay. Well, again, thank you, everyone. And please call or email, and we will definitely be answering any other questions that anyone has. Take care.